Hi, this is Lisa Runquist. This is the second part of Unit 6. Professor Steves talked about the whole area of lobbying and politics, but there are a lot of other things that we're going to try and cover in this week. The first issue is when you're making or you're forming a nonprofit organization that you want to be a charitable organization. First question is, where is your support coming from? Because if your support is coming from one or a few people, then what you have is a private foundation. If the support is from a number of people, you have what's not a private foundation, commonly called a public charity. There are some organizations, such as churches, hospitals, schools, which are automatically considered to be publicly supported rather than being a private foundation. But most nonprofits, when they file, have to decide, well, are we going to be getting our money from one or a few sources, or will we indeed be able to come up with enough people to provide funding for us that we can be considered to be a publicly supported. Now, there are some organizations, such as a school would actually be getting most of its money from tuition as well as from gifts, and the tuition can be counted as public support in a way. There are actually two parts to what would normally be public support. One is the gifts, and the other is money that comes as a result of the activities that you're engaged in. So the difference between a private foundation and a publicly supported organization is that private foundations are subject to much stricter regulations in many ways. And the reason why is that when you have an organization that's funded by a few people, it also tends to be controlled by those people. And the IRS, the Congress, wanted to make sure that that organization was not being operated for the benefit of that particular individual or family, but that indeed it was operated for the benefit of the public. So that's one of the types of organizations and one of the issues that you come up with. Because there are so many issues that go along with being a private foundation, one of the other types of entities that will quite often be used is what is commonly referred to as a supporting organization. And if you look at the section 509 A3, 509 is the section that of the Internal Revenue Code that deals with whether you're a private foundation or publicly supported. One of the options is to be a supporting organization, and in that case, the donor has designated that the funds will be used to benefit one or a few organizations. So the money can come from one person or a few people and still be considered to be publicly supported if the money is actually going to publicly supported organizations, and you will have in the Articles of Incorporation a designation that it's actually been formed to benefit those particular organizations. So in that case, you do have a publicly supported organization not subject to the private foundation rules, but you are limited in that the funds must be used to benefit the particular organizations that you've listed. Another option that people have used, because they often don't want to have a private foundation, is to actually give the money but reserve the right to advise the organization as to how that money will be spent. So what they do is they form what's called a donor advised fund. And there are a lot of organizations now that have been formed actually as private or as publicly supported organizations, but that have one of their principal purposes to actually bring in the money for these donor advised funds and spend it. Now, the thing to be aware of with regard to the donor advised funds is that the donor cannot direct the funding, they can only advise. And so it's up to the nonprofit organization that has received the funds to make sure that the funds are going to an organization that qualifies as being an exempt organization, and that the funds will be used for that purpose. So it's not quite as simple as one might think. The question of the requirements for donor advised funds continues to be up for grabs. There will be more changes probably in the law, in my opinion, in the future. So if you're going to be using donor advised funds, and they're a good tool, you want to make sure that you stay up to date on what the law is, so that you don't end up making a fund that is not complying with the current law. Now, the other type of situation that you have is where someone wants to form a nonprofit organization, but they're not sure that they are ready to go ahead and incorporate it, establish its exempt status, and deal with the administration. This is the other side. What we've talked about with these others is what happens with the donor and where the money goes. But on this side, you have a situation where someone who's starting the organization and they don't really want to actually have their own nonprofit at all. And there's this method that's called fiscal sponsorship, where there are nonprofit organizations that are formed for the purpose of taking care of these entities and seeing that they're continuing to, or what happens is when someone gives for that purpose, the money goes into an account that is specified for that particular portion that or the purpose that it was given for, and then a portion of that money will be used for paying the administration of the fund, and then the rest will be available for the person or persons that are running this new nonprofit entity to actually go ahead and try and fulfill the purpose for which it was formed in the first place. And then if it's successful, oftentimes they end up actually going ahead and forming their own nonprofit and going forward. But it gives them a chance to see if this is really a viable idea without going through the whole process of incorporating and going through the establishment of the exempt status and all of that. So those are the different types of organizations that we're going to be looking at. I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions as you go through, but it's really quite an interesting area because not only are we looking at, well, actually forming one and running it for that purpose, but what are the other options of how can you get to where you want to be using perhaps another form.